Thank you all for your flexibility, and just as a reminder, we do have a hard stop at the end of the time for the panel. Hopefully we'll get a couple extra minutes, but the speakers will exit the room. If they have an opportunity to stand back for any additional questions that you may have, they will be out in the lobby area. Otherwise, they will be escorted by their staffs on their way. So I just wanted to make that quick reminder. Thank you all for your flexibility today and for joining us. We did have a last-minute change with the scheduling, so I'm very happy to see that everybody has come back, a few new faces as well, so really appreciate it. Okay, I think we are ready to begin. So we have the Undersecretary of the Army is making his way in. Ma'am, Dr. Erickson, could I ask you to join us up on stage, please? Okay, gentlemen. Okay, so we are about to begin the fireside chat with the Honorable Secretary of the Army, who I was going to say, what did I say? Secretary. Did I say Secretary? Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, wishful thinking. I don't know. Okay. So the Honorable Undersecretary of the Army, Honorable Gabe Camarillo. We have the Honorable Dr. April Erickson from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, and Mr. Farouk Mita, who is the Director for Small Business Programs up in the Office of DOD under the Office of Acquisition and Sustainment under Dr. LaPlante. Dr. Erickson works under Ms. Heidi Hsu in R&E. So I am, in the interest of time, I'm going to forego reading the bios, but needless to say, you don't get to these positions unless you are highly skilled, highly competent, well-educated, and have an extensive amount of time both in private industry as well as in government. So thank you all very much for joining us today. So I am going to ask you all for any opening comments that you might have. We are going to try to leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So we will lead off with you, Mr. Undersecretary, and make sure I get that right, and any announcements. So this is your third year joining us here at the Small Business Seminar. That's right. 2 years in a row, you had announcements to make. I'm hoping we're going to make it the trifecta, 3 years in a row.
Great. I'll do my very best. Okay. Kim, thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here for the third year at AUSA as part of this forum. As I've said each time, the Army does incredible things every single day, and our soldiers are incredibly talented, but we really do need the innovation support of our industrial base, and a key font of that innovation is all in our small businesses. And so I've been a very strong advocate, nowhere near as strong or as tireless as Kim is, of course, in the Army, but to make sure that we make it a little bit easier to do business with the Army, that we harness the talent and ingenuity that all of you and your creative ideas bring to bear, and most importantly, that we understand what perspectives and concerns you all have. So I get a lot out of these exchanges every year, but I assure you, this is not the only time I interface with small businesses. It is something I prioritize, when I travel. Certainly other opportunities to engage. Farouk and I spoke at a conference in Chicago, I think earlier this year, dedicated to small business opportunities across the department. And so I'm very pleased, first of all, to be here. I want to thank AUSA, and I want to thank my fellow co-panelists, Dr. Erickson and Farouk Mita as well. Farouk and I go back a really, really long time working on these issues across the Department of Defense. I'll begin, I know we want to leave time for questions, by just announcing where we are on some of the things that we've been talking about the last couple of years. As those of you know, when I came into this position, I led an effort with Kim's help to assess what our small business industrial base looked like in the Army, where we had seen ourselves, either folks who had left the marketplace in terms of business opportunities with the Army, and where we had grown. And I was concerned at the time that, frankly, on the innovation side, we weren't doing as much to encourage new entrants to do business with the Army. We know it can be complex. We know that it can be cumbersome. But I felt that maybe some of the competitive opportunities hadn't been tailored to really encourage that participation. And we all know that the dichotomy was always between direct awards, which we do through SBIR and SIDR grants and other small business set-asides, and then working and teaming with large primes on competitive opportunities. So what I wanted to do was find a way we could bridge the gap. And so we announced a series of initiatives, one of which included what I call Project Vista at the time, and it created a novel approach to some of our acquisition programs. We were going to, for the first time, give source selection credit to integrators or primes that actually brought into their proposals small businesses and small business technologies that had been invested in and funded within the department. It could be through a SBIR or SIDR grant, or it could be through an OTA. And it didn't have to be Army. We always said it could have been an Air Force or DoD-wide OTA prototyping effort. And so we started with 5 programs in FY24, and I think all but 2 of them are left to make awards later in FY25. And what I found was great. It proved out some of my hypothesis. Each of the offerers on the 3 programs we've awarded under this new program, all of them had reached out to a small business that met the criteria and had included them in their proposal. So we're very encouraged by its success. We hope that we can continue to expand this program and continue to offer source selection credit to these integrators to give really small businesses another pathway to kind of bridge the valley of death and understand how to do business with the Army in a more enduring fashion. But I would be remiss if I didn't have an announcement today. So as Kim teed it up, another thing that we hear a lot about, it's the concerns that small businesses face in dealing with the department's requirements, for example, in the area of cybersecurity. We've talked a lot about it in the Army. We know that across the Department of Defense, there's a number of efforts underway to help alleviate some of those concerns and to provide opportunities for small businesses to meet cybersecurity requirements without having to incur all of the fixed costs that go along with that that a traditional defense prime would do. So we talked a little bit about it last year, but now we're ready to announce what we call the Next Gen Commercial Operations in Defended Enclaves, otherwise known as ENCODE pilot. Now, this essentially provides a cyber secure enclave in a secure environment for small businesses to participate in, where they can collaborate, share information, most importantly, do their own work that they need to that would otherwise present a threat vector for actors that we know are very active in the cybersecurity space. And what's great about it is that it's compliant with CMMC. So all of the department's requirements would be met by operating in this environment. There are safeguards in place to ensure that your data would be protected, and we're looking to launch this pilot later this year to allow small businesses to apply and to be a part of it. So we've called it notionally before cybersecurity as a service, but really what it is, it's a pilot for us to create the environment that these small businesses can operate in without having to pay for the infrastructure themselves. So more details to follow from ASALT in the Army about how we're going to accept applications to apply for it and what we're going to learn in the first round or pilot of the program. I think we can continue to expand it in the future to provide software development environments and software development tools that are secure for this aspect of the industrial base. So all said, I think in the last couple of years, we're making some very significant headway in trying to encourage innovation and at the same time achieve security and to expand our access to this really important part of our industrial base. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I think that's should be very exciting to our small business participants. And I'll do a small plug for following the Army Small Business Office on LinkedIn, especially where we'll be working with our ASALT partners to put information out when we are ready to start accepting applications. So thank you very much for that exciting announcement. So Dr. Erickson, thank you. This is your first AUSA that I'm aware of. So thank you so much for joining us today. Happy to have you here. I know you have an extensive background in NASA, so we're happy to have you in the department. Bring in all of those years of expertise to help us solve our problems. So a few minutes to offer to you for opening opening comments.
So first of all, I wanted to say congratulations, because I think the Honorable Camarillo just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, so I think he deserves an applause.
I was just the host.
Oh, you're the host, but that's pretty cool too. So I must say that I'm sort of still the newbie around, but I'm not newbie to small business and the innovative research program. And I also want to highlight STTR, because we often just say SIBR, but we forget about the sitter part. And I'm one of those people that have for many years been that advocate and worked my way sort of from that researcher at NASA who partnered with small businesses to really also to put out the solicitations to tell them where our gaps in technology needs were, and then eventually becoming the program managers, and then eventually our expert for sensors and detectors across the agency. I'm also that person that worked with academia, and I want our partners to remember that there's a sitter part that we're not always taking advantage of, and that's that partnership with our nonprofit institutions like the universities. So please don't forget to utilize that part of it. I think I see an underutilization and opportunities there. Just to give you sort of the broader picture for the Department of Defense, $2.7 billion is the funding level that we have just under DOD in my particular portfolio for R&E. I am the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology, and have the fortune of that piece of the portfolio also collaborating with FFRDCs and UARCs and our STEM communities as well. When I talk about SIBR Sitter, I also know that the struggles and strife that the small business community have faced when trying to apply. So one of the things that we most recently did with the new program manager that we had come in, she looked at the solicitation and the instructions, and she reduced it by 50%. That's like huge when you're a small business trying to read through all of the regulations and the requirements to fill out an application. I also really look at how are we going to transition. Our Honorable Camarillo mentioned the valleys of death. Well, I realize there's not just one, there are several, especially when you're trying to transition this final product towards the warfighter and get it into our manufacturing capabilities. So there are many sort of steps along the way where we're going to help to nurture and to guide. We're providing more ability to communicate to our communities, where we're developing a hub that will actually have a SIBR Sitter spoke that will allow you to do training or one-on-one discussions with your proposals prior to submitting. We see that if you have that opportunity to connect with someone, then you're more likely to submit something that's successful and doesn't get kicked back that year. The other thing that we've done is we've actually helped to create the frequency and create a regular cadence to when the submissions come out. So now there is a monthly open solicitation that's offered the first Wednesday of the month. So you don't have to worry about or wonder when you've missed that cycle. At NASA, we do it once a year, and then phase 2 is once a year, and oh my gosh, it's now the mid 6 months later, and I have to wait another 6 months. Well, that's not the case for the Department of Defense. So now you have this more readily available, regular cadence, and let's see. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that if you ever feel that you have some great idea, please don't be a stranger to our office. We want to nurture those ideas. I believe that the small business community is that non-traditional space that come up with the innovative ideas. You can take more risk on than sometimes the larger businesses, but we would like to see you partner with industry. We'd like to see you also partner with our manufacturing innovative institutes and using those to help solidify. And then the last thing is I'm trying to pull in the Patent and Trade Office, because I think it's very important in our country to patent our ideas. We want you to be successful. We want you to maintain that intellectual property and to make money off of that intellectual property. So I think that's it for now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So important, right? We have so many great ideas in this country, but if we don't go through that hard stuff of getting it, a patent or a trademark or, protecting our IP, then we haven't done ourselves any justice. So that's hard work. Okay, so Mr. Mita, thank you so much for joining us. I know we're going to see you again on a panel a little bit later, hopefully, but I'm so glad to have you on this panel today. So a few seconds for you, sir, for opening comments.
Yeah, first of all, it's really great to be here with all of you, Kim, Undersecretary Camarillo, Dr. Erickson, all of you. Thanks for taking the time. I will just say that right now I think it's a really exciting time to be a small business. You heard a lot of great things from my colleagues. My job is to be, my job as the Director of Small Business at OSD is to essentially be the advisor to the Secretary and Undersecretary on all things small business, policy, programs, engagement. I serve as the functional leader for the 750 plus small business professionals in our acquisition workforce. And I'll tell you that when we rolled out our small business strategy last year, one of my big focus areas was how do we send the right demand signals to small businesses that were open for business with you. When I started in this job in 2021, we inherited many of our small business programs that were either lacking funding, lacking authorization. They were essentially, I would say, dying on the vine. The SIBR-SITR program is one example, which we fought really hard to make sure got reauthorized. But my office also oversees DoD's Mentor Protege program. It also oversees now the Rapid Innovation Fund and our Apex Accelerator program. All three of these programs we put a lot of energy into to make sure that they are authorized, funded, and available to you, so you know where your opportunities are to do business with us. Our Apex Accelerator program, which used to be with DLA, and we took it over about 2 years ago now, is our 97 centers across the country that help companies learn how to do business with DoD. Now, I'll tell you, when I took the program over a couple of years ago, I'm not going to ask, but I usually ask, hey, can anybody guess what the one metric of the program was? Well, I'll just tell you what the one metric was. It was how cheaply can you counsel a small business on how to do business with us? I'll tell you that I took that metric, I tore it up, and I threw it away. And now we have real goals and metrics for the program that include how do we help companies comply with things like CMMC, like Undersecretary mentioned? How do we get companies more information on the programs and opportunities that exist with us through Defense Production Act, Mentor Protege, SBIR, STTR? How do we help companies who are looking to enter the DIB to learn about the registrations and certifications, et cetera, that we need? So our metrics are much different, and those 97 centers are there to serve you. Our Mentor Protege program, when I took this position, the Mentor Protege program was zeroed out of the president's budget, and it had been a pilot program for 33 years. Wow. I mean, could you imagine that in 33 years the government couldn't figure out if this program worked or not? Well, we worked to get the funding back into the president's budget. We worked with Congress in FY23 to make the program permanent, and we made some really important changes to the program. Now, for the mentor requirements in the law, the revenue requirement went from $100 million to $25 million. Why? Because we believe strongly that sometimes, or often, small and medium-sized businesses can mentor small businesses better than a large company can. We also created a pilot program where because our Mentor Protege program at DoD, for those of you who don't know about it, we reimburse the costs to the mentor to provide developmental assistance to the protege. A lot of protege firms came to me and said, Farouk, this is great, we're getting great developmental assistance, but we're not getting any money. Well, now for software development, manufacturing, and engineering services, 25% of the cost reimbursement can go directly to the small business. And we've actually partnered with Dr. Erickson's Manufacturing Innovation Institutes to do just that, where we're working with them to be another resource provider, and we're getting reimbursements to the small guys. Lastly, on Mentor Protege, I'll say that our contracting timelines used to take 12 to 18 months. We've now set up a new centralized contracting mechanism where we are now awarding Mentor Protege agreements in 60 days or less. A massive, massive benefit to industry. The last thing I'll mention is the Rapid Innovation Program, which we, for the first time, put into the President's budget in 2025. We heard about the Valley of Death, or the multiple valleys of death. Well, the Valley of Death from prototype to production is an important one. And imagine that a program that Congress established in 2011 and made permanent in 2017 has not been funded since 2019. 5 fiscal years. So we're hoping that in 2025, we've rebranded this program to call it RISE, and we're hoping that it will rise back up and we'll be able to start getting this program back up off the ground to really help all of you. I can go on and on, but I'll just stop there so we can get to questions. But my main point is that we wanted to make sure that we are sending the right signals to you that not only are we saying we're open for business, but what you heard up here are real, tangible opportunities that are available to small companies.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask one question, and then I think we'll be at a point where we can turn it over to the audience. So, and I'm sure that they are not shy. So, in keeping with the AUSA theme this year of transforming for a complex world, how do you see the opportunity space for small business has changed, and what do you see going forward? Sir?
I'll start, Kim. And first of all, I think it's a great question. So in the Army specifically, in addition to some of the programs that I described earlier, we're doing something a little bit different about how we're providing capabilities to our formations. And you've probably heard a little bit about it over the course of the panel discussions, and it's called Transformation in Contact. And at the heart of it, it is taking individual units and fielding them with different mixes of planned weapon systems and capabilities, but also a mix of really innovative technology that is existing today and it's not part of a program of record. So a great example of that, for example, is the commercial UAVs that are compliant with all of existing statutes and regulations, but frankly, we don't have a good program hook to buy them in mass and field them with units, or to help us determine how many of them we want to deploy. Loitering munitions, different software command and control tools, and these are just a few to name, robotic systems, just a few to name as examples. And I think this is creating another avenue of opportunity for small businesses to participate, because it is giving us a chance to see what innovation small business can bring to bear in some of these problem sets, and also how they can contribute in ways that don't necessarily align to an existing program of record. So this transformation in contact will obviously inform requirements, and we all know that process. But in addition, we are fielding and leaving units with some of these capabilities today if it works with them. So I would say in many ways it is kind of collapsing what used to be a very multi-year process of learning and experimenting, then defining a requirement, getting a solicitation out, and then ultimately getting on contract. We're kind of folding that in on itself and kind of fielding and experimenting at the same time.
Thank you. That is also exciting.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing is sort of a reinvigorated healthiness for the small business world. And what I think, this is my personal reflection, is that when we went into COVID, people were at home trying to figure out how am I going to reinvent myself? How am I going to, have that work-life balance? Do I want to work for a big private industry? And so we got a lot of new budding ideas. The introduction of AI to help not only reduce the processes that we do in the government, but also how they're able to get to a more successful solution faster. So those are some of the transformative ways that I've been seeing the small business community impact. I also think that people have started to say, we need everybody. And I've been saying this for my entire career. So I work with partners, I say K through Gray, right? So kindergarten, really. Kids are coming up with great ideas, and it expands straight through to people who are senior. And then that also is across the different sort of areas, from other government agencies, from our academic partners, small business, large businesses. We really have to struggle together and to pull together to be able to ultimately create the things that we need. Each one of us can't do it by ourselves. We see all the time, large industry does not start off as large industry. It started off as a small business, right? And then it grew. And so I see those changes, and if we're not all working together, we're not going to be successful. So a really practical sort of presentation of what I see happening. There are things that are happening in my own office and how we partner, as Farouk mentioned earlier, and how we are partnering to streamline the processes as well, but then also working with the department's chief digital and artificial intelligence office to also streamline those processes. So those are some of the changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just point to a memo that came out from the Office of Management and Budget earlier this year on the use of small businesses on multiple award contracts. One of the things that we saw was that the rule of two was not being evenly applied. We saw that there was, I would say, forum shopping, where there was not enough accountability on our acquisition workforce on using small businesses on multiple award contracts. So we worked across the administration with OMB to develop a new proposed rule that will go into the FAR, but we've also put the memo out earlier this year to start implementing it now. And what the rule essentially will say is that from the earliest stages of acquisition planning, our small business professionals and SBA's procurement center representatives shall be involved from day one. Now, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. At DoD, I think we've been generally good about it. But now across every federal agency, the small business folks will be involved from the earliest stages of acquisition planning when that rule is finalized. And they will do the market research, and they will work with the contracting workforce. And on a multiple award contract, essentially, if you're not going to set it aside for small business competition, if we are not going to set it aside for small business competition, we've got to document, and document. And what that's doing is changing the culture. So the incentive is to make sure that we're going to small businesses on our multiple award contracts. Also in the FAR, for the first time, the new rule will mention using on-ramps for long-term contracts. That's going to be a really big change. It's obviously not easy to implement, but it doesn't even mention it. It's not even mentioned in the FAR today, so that'll be mentioned. And we're going to make sure that that's essentially. There's more and more. I don't want to take too much time, but that's a really important rule that I think you might not feel the benefits of today, but over the next 3 to 5 years, I see a big culture change on how we leverage multiple award contracts to reach small businesses. And I think the percentages are going to go higher and higher with that.
Thank you. And what I really love about what you all said was it reinforced themes and messages and content from earlier in the morning. So you're really helping to tie in some of the key points that we had earlier into today's session. So I think that is totally unplanned and most wonderful. So if you would like to come up to the mics, if anybody has any questions, happy to have you. So while people are contemplating whether they're going to be brave, so we did talk about AI at the last session. So we'll have this gentleman, if there's a lull, I'll ask my AI question. Otherwise, sir?
Thanks. Although I'm interested in the answer to that, too, actually. My name's Sidney Friedberg. I'm a reporter, so not so much brave as simply lacking any sense of social boundaries. Wanted to ask for a bit more on your cybersecurity enclave for small business. Obviously, the formal announcement isn't out yet with the details, and you can't preempt that, and maybe those are still in flux, but can you paint at least a general picture of, who's going to run this on the Army side and provide the expertise and the infrastructure that obviously small businesses can't replicate affordably? How large are you hoping to start in terms of number of folks getting into the pilot? What the criteria will be, or it'll just be, first come, first served, or some kind of lottery mechanism. There are lots of interesting details I'm sure everyone here wants to know about.
Sure. Thanks, Sydney, for the question. And I'm actually encouraged that there's that much of an appetite for the details, because I think this could really help our small businesses and cover one of their core concerns. So just by way of background, in FY23, the Army actually did business with about 12,000 small businesses. And, I would say that in our analysis, about half of those small businesses were exposed to anywhere from medium to high risk cybersecurity threat vectors. And at the same time, depending on how they're capitalized and how many resources they have, their ability to overcome them, despite our efforts across the department, can be very, very challenged. So we knew we had to do something. So part of what we're going to do with this pilot is we're setting aside about $26 million in FY25 and FY26 for what will be an initial foray in creating kind of a secure, classified enclave where there will be collaboration tools, there'll be a workspace where these companies can kind of do what they need to do, and also kind of begin to do some software development efforts for those that are in that type of business. the criteria on how people will apply, how many we can admit into this program as with the funding profile that we've got. I think those details will be forthcoming from ASALT, who will be overseeing it in the next couple of days. But there is a significant amount of partnership between the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, as well as the CIO of the Army, Leo Garciga, in pulling this together as something that we absolutely have to do. I think we will learn a lot in terms of its utilization and how effective it is with the initial kind of tranche of small businesses that we bring into it. And I think the goal is to learn from that and continue to evolve the program to make it even better for those of you who are in the audience that know that you have to comply with CMMC.
That sounds like 25 spaces million, is that for the 1 year or for both?
That's across 2 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sir?
Hi there. Another reporter question for you guys. I'm Joe Gould from Politico. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. In one of the panels yesterday, we heard from an Army official who said that there's a supply chain issue with microelectronics. We're a few years out from COVID, where we saw big impacts on the supply chain and labor, and some of those issues are still impacting the defense industrial base, and we know small businesses are more sensitive to economic shocks. I'm wondering what you're hearing from the small businesses you're working with about supply chain issues, labor issues, and what the department is doing to help them. Thank you.
Dr. Erickson, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start there. So it's interesting because I was just reading an announcement about something we did in September for microelectronics, and this is part of President Biden and VP Harris's announcement back in 2022, where we infused a bunch of money into industry to actually build that base back up. The industrial base is really important. It's always been a little different for me from the NASA perspective, because we really needed like special electronics, right? So we need ones and twosies. But when we look at everything that we hold near and dear in terms of our hand, if my child does not like relinquish this from her hand, it has everything we need to communicate, to connect, to get information, and it's all using microelectronics. So we're all impacted every day, and there has been a steady infusion of funding into that industry. As I mentioned in September, one of our ASDs performing the duties of ASD just had a big kickoff for additional money. It was like the $26 million of additional funding to continue to grow that industry base.
I'll just add on it. I mean, I think if you look at the breadth and depth of systems that the Army currently has fielded, their dependency on microelectronics is probably massive compared to the other services, just in the number and numerosity of our requirements. Certainly COVID had an impact across the entire supply chain. I think we've learned a lot. Certainly in this particular space, there is a steady demand signal that we've seen that has disrupted not only the defense market, automobile market, and many others across the economy. We continue to work kind of across the interagency. It is a whole of government approach to help bolster the microelectronics industry and to ensure that there is access to trusted microelectronics for defense purposes. And so the Army, and really broadly the Department of Defense, is part of those larger efforts across the federal government. I will just say that the way that we continue to mitigate is ensure that we're doing proper planning in our acquisition programs, where we know we're going to have long lead times, where we can do forward buys, where we can look at ways to perhaps reorient the sequencing of where those microelectronic deliveries are going to go, depending on the highest priority programs. We actively manage that, and I'm very pleased with our program managers that do that very well.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one quick question, and then maybe we'll have time left for a couple closing remarks. So, ma'am.
Okay, not a reporter. So I work for Mr. Garciga. I work for Enterprise Services Agency under the CIO. So my question is about the enclave that you're talking about. Is the intent going to be to work with NetCom, Seventh Signal, our Cyber, all of those entities to help make sure that these ATOs go through quicker? Because right now, as a government entity, that is one of the issues we run into. even if we're working with a small business and we come up with a solution, it's a year, it's 18 months before we can put it on our network and we can use it because it has to go through that process. So is this pilot program going to help shorten that for us?
Let me answer your question in two parts. So the question that she's asking, which is really important for those of you who don't live in our networks every single day, there is a process known as authority to operate. It is called an ATO, a license to get onto our own DoD Army networks, that any new piece of software, any new capability has to go through that process in order to kind of ride on our networks. We have seen that is one of the longest lead times in terms of getting new software deployed and fielded and making a difference in our Army. One of the things we've done in our software development policy that Secretary Wormuth announced at the very beginning of this year was to create a process for ATO reciprocity and streamlining the process for approving ATOs. So basically, it's like your driver's license working in different states. You don't have to get relicensed in, Michigan and Wisconsin. You know that you can use your Virginia or Maryland or DC license or driver's license, and it's equally effective there. Same thing with other services or other agencies within the Army that grant ATOs. So that will help. But to your more specific question is, how is this new small business secure environment going to have to deal with that? And it's very clear that I clarify what this is. It is a cloud-based secure enclave, not part of our networks, that will be utilized by the small business vendor base, and we will be providing it through the Army and through Army funding, so that we want them to do business with the Army. We know that one of the limiting factors is meeting cybersecurity requirements, but we don't want to lose out on that innovation. So if we build this environment and we give access to small business, then they can do their work there. We know it's secure, it's trusted, it's not tied to Army networks. It is really a network or a network enclave that we lend to them while they're doing the work of the Army. And it provides security, protections for their IP, all of those kinds of things that you would be normally concerned about. So it wouldn't normally have to go through an ATO because it's not software that would ride on our networks.
Okay, there's 1 minute left before they give me the hook.
I've spoken a lot, so let me defer to my two colleagues.
I just want to be mindful that something I often talk about is like having due diligence, and you have to make sure that you look at who you're partnering with, because if you're partnering with our near-peer adversaries, then we can't give you money. So that's the first thing. I wanted to also mention that the Office of Strategic Capital has recently launched the ability to actually provide funds, lending funds, so money, a loan, so that small businesses can actually buy manufacturing equipment. And so that's a big incentive, too, to look at what our Office of Strategic Capital is doing. And then do your homework. Make sure you understand the needs of the government, and there are many ways to figure that out. And I say other government agencies because I cannot just toss my NASA hat. But there are ways that you can find out what are the vision and missions and the critical capabilities, the areas that we think we need new technology, and then look for that dual purpose. So if you're able to, say, create something for another government agency, I can actually go peek into their portfolio for CyberSitter, and because you've already had a contract, I don't have to compete that contract. And so I used to do that when I was in NASA, because I was like, oh yeah, Department of Defense has made that investment. Let me go ahead and utilize that investment and utilize it for something else. So those are the things that I would give you sort of opportunities to. So do your homework, due diligence, and the last thing is don't forget to partner with universities.
A few quick things for me. One is my office's website is business.defense.gov. Very simple. And when you go to that website, it is a one-stop shop for small businesses to learn about a lot of different programs, resources, and initiatives around the department for small businesses. We also have a platform called Project Spectrum, which is projectspectrum.io, which is at no cost to you, cybersecurity education, training, self-assessment capabilities, tool reviews. Actually, we now have courses on there to help SBIR, STTR companies with foreign ownership control and influence-related issues, FOCI 101. Later this year or early next year, we'll be releasing at no cost commercial due diligence tools. So before you put in your application for a CyberSitter, you could do your own self-assessment to see if you have any foci-related issues. And if you do, we'll help you mitigate them before you do that. And then the last piece is our Apex accelerators, are our 97 field offices, our initial points of entry for all companies, small, medium, large, startups. Many times our primes go to Apex accelerators to look for suppliers. So please be in their networks. They do all kinds of events, and they also help companies not just with DoD contracts, but with other federal agencies, including NASA, and state and local government. We actually get a cost share from state government to help companies with state and local government contracting as well. So definitely utilize that resource as well.
Can we have a huge round of applause for our esteemed panel? Okay. Again, please let them exit the stage so that we can help them get to their next engagements. Thank you all very much.
Are you going to the Wednesday?